and taste it. It's my sweet beginning.
Hey there everyone, Monk7Mad here today with a requested tutorial, and that was to show you how I created my Halo 4 speed art, which I uploaded to my channel the other day. Now this is going to be a relatively strange video, purely because it's quite difficult to explain something that you do in a speed art. I mean, I can explain sort of the processes and what I took, but I don't think I'll be able to recreate it exactly the same again while tutorialing it. Took me about 35 minutes last time to do it the whole way through, and I'm just going to give you a bit of a breakdown because this is what I started off with, a basic render, and I'm just going to try and take you through the steps, but I did it a little bit more slowly to perhaps what you would have seen on the speed art. Now basically the way that I've done this is I've compiled a lot of textures together, and I've tried to vary the textures so that they create different sorts of effects. So for example, the background bit that I have added here is kind of a smoky looking thing, and when a flare underneath a color correction is with something that's quite light, quite misty, it tends to pick up a lot of light. If I was to put a flare behind it and then put, let's say, a color correction on top, I'm trying to find one quickly, probably in here. Ooh. Not really breaking the point too well, but you get that real emphasis from the flare. Now this is all the lighting together, but basically what you're getting here is you get the light from the flare at the moment. It's within a very small radius, and what happens is when you add a flare to it and you get a certain number of color corrections or a certain type of color correction, it reacts almost to some extent, and it's created a light that extends far enough over here just to create a small atmosphere. Now what I continued to do was then compile tons of little bits together, so only little nitty bits. At the moment I've got two flares here in the areas where I want the focus mainly to be dedicated. So I've got the main focus that I want is really around the shield and the top half of the body, and you know, the whole way that I'm sort of doing this is through perspective. What I'm doing is I'm slowly building up things like the background, where I create that sort of enhanced background around. At the moment these are quite blurred, that's actually how the texture was, but the fact that I've done it in this style, the fact that it's more clear in the center, it almost brings your eye back in. And this is what a lot of people sort of struggle with as trying to become something like a graphic designer, is their eye for it. Now sometimes you can combine things like, for example, the flare which I chose here. Now the background, again, you can see that the light is going in different directions, but it also looks like it's coming from the center, so your eye automatically again is dragged to the center. And it's this whole idea of just sort of combining a few bits and pieces together to make it so focus goes on one specific thing. Now with certain things you can use different types of lighting. Now I added things like even little bits of nature in the background, so that again when you look, you're now looking behind perhaps his shoulders as opposed to right off screen here. And it's just that whole idea of being able to tell when there's being enough added. So I've added things like a grainy texture, which again a bit blurry, sort of take a little bit more edge off of this sort of area here and the area here. To build up a little bit more focus, I've added things like nebula textures, and I've changed most of these from normal to the blend mode called screen. And the way that this will really help is the fact that screen is designed in Photoshop as a blend mode to remove dark artifacts, which is basically if you've got, say, a night sky and you've got an image of a meteorite or something, what it will do is it will remove the nighttime sky but leave the area that's lighter. And being able to do this really helps because it allows for a lot easier sort of blending with certain things. I mean, like for example, the tree in the background will get a little bit of light from this and how it reacts, and a bit of smoke as well. That always seems to enhance things. It sort of all just comes together quite nice. Now I won't be able to tell you exactly how to do a speed art exactly. I can only suggest a few things. That's the beautiful thing about speed art, is that you can plan certain things like photo manipulation, but sometimes, I mean, this one was done straight off the top of the head as I was doing it. It was just one of those things where I had no plan. I just thought, let's just throw everything together. and bits of the video you probably notice even when it's sped up that it's quite slow. That's because I'm trying to think of what I could add, and I thought of things such as the meteorites in the background here, and again that just puts a lot more focus, because at the moment we've got like a little sort of lighter section around the outside, and then we've got this massive burst of light in the center, and the meteorite just sort of gives it a bit more perception because the meteorites look like they're further back in the picture. Again, this play on thing with perception. Now a few bits were just sort of added in just for a bit of lighting and just for the sake of it to cover up areas. I thought that I would add in sparks, and at the time it wasn't really that strong, so what I decided to do was add 3 of the same layer. So I duplicated the layer twice, and what it does is it then builds up and brings the light up in certain things, and by doing this the color creation, so the color correction that goes on top, was able to pick up this area a little bit more. Now some of the things like glass, the reason I added these is, again, it's to do with this whole way that you can look at it. The way that I've got the glass sort of, because it's smashing as if it's hit a surface, and I'll change it to normal so you can see it. I've just warped the perspective here, but it looks like it's along his arm, and it looks like something's almost crashing into his arm and obliterating there. And I thought this whole idea with the meteorite in the background and something like this, you know, it could create for a nice effect. Now personally I think it works quite nice, but you know, it's sort of all what you're looking for at the time. With things like Halo, you expect a really strong character, one that has all this power, and you know, being able to make him look perhaps epic in a way is probably the best way to do that, is to just put all the focus on him by putting even the little things like, I've done another speed art where I've actually engraved my name into the outfit just to make it a bit more personal. And sometimes it's just adding in little touches like that that can really change it. Now I added in, so far let me just recap on the textures I've used. I've used a smoky background, I've used stars and night sky, I've used some meteorites, I used a space nebula, I used some trees, I used some sparks, a glass smash stock image, and some fire. Now with the fire and the color correction, sometimes the colors can really be affected. So what I did was I built some layers to just sort of counter how it was. You know, the whole idea, what I'm trying to get on with here, is that it all goes in the same color. If you start muddling it up a little bit, sometimes, you know, it can just look a bit too much. Now what I decided to do then was, because I want the focus to be in this real center part, I went to the filter section and I chose the filter called spatter, and by doing this it puts this sort of rugged dot effect or jot effect on top, and by using a layer mask I was able to just remove the main area which I wanted to focus on while leaving bits around it still in the filter. And again, it now makes it a little bit more obvious this is where you're meant to be looking, this section right here. I then went on to try and tint the visor. Now I did this through a gradient map, and I used a layer mask again to just focus on this area. I used the polygon lasso tool to select that area, although a lot of people tend to use things like the pen tool. Then I chucked in some more smoke, and this is again just to pick up some of the light, perhaps from the sparks and a bit of the background. Some of them I sort of left them there for just sort of background, and again I just put a bit more glass in. I'm trying to balance it out a bit. Now a few things like these bubbles, they were completely unnecessary, but I thought, you know, just adding a little bit more to the background, perhaps pushing it so that might be a bit more focusy, and because it's near his upper half here, again it might bring even more attention. Now I just did the same creation with the fire on both sides, and I used it to control the brightness through the hue and saturation, some levels and some curves. Now this was the longest part, and this was building all the color corrections. So I'm just going to break it down one by one what they are, and I'm going to run through this quickly because I don't really want to drag this out for too much longer. Okay, so the first thing I did was I added a gradient fill at the bottom here, and what this does is it just cuts off the bottom and starts to almost make it look like it's fading into the image. again, putting more creation here, and this is why the filter comes in quite handy, because it almost gives it like that fade out effect. I then decided to build the colour, which I mainly wanted, which was this sort of blue. Now I use the gradient map, and I changed the blend mode. Most of the colour blend modes that I use are actually overlay, but if you're interested in learning how to make a colour correction, I actually have a tutorial on my channel at the moment, and I hope to do another one, well, relatively soon. Next step was to build another gradient map. Now this one was actually for contrast, and to just sort of bring a little bit more darkness into parts of the image. Now the problem is at the moment, because I've got a combination of both some smoke and a black background, it becomes a bit brighter in some areas than it perhaps should. Now I then tried to again deepen the colour by using another gradient map. I then built another gradient map. This time it was actually designed for the center character, and this orange here just gives the visor an extra bit of shine. And now the purple actually sort of blends in quite nicely with the colour I wanted in the background, and they sort of fit pieces together. Now the main way that I control the background colour is actually through the levels, and what I did was I tweaked it so that everything was really dark and really strong. Now by doing this, it's created this really sort of intense look, but perhaps too much for what I was after. So firstly I built another colour correction just to try and get it so it was at its strongest point, or where I felt that it would be, that would be its brightest point, because then I can go down and tweak it a little bit more. Now that I've got all the light and stuff where I want it, so the meteorite's quite bright, I've got the glass and everything's quite bright, the visor's strong, characters sort of exterior parts are now out of focus, or not as much the centre of attention. So I was at quite a good stage. I thought then time to chuck in the hue and saturation just to dim it down. Now by dimming it down, of course it does reduce the intensity, but this is the bit that's kind of down to you, where you want to go with how strong and intense you want yours to become. Now I thought by just reducing it, the best thing is to rebuild on top of it. When you build colour corrections, you don't just throw, say, blue on it and hope that everything goes blue. You have to change it all to one colour first to then be enabled to modify the colours. I then added just another gradient, just again to just add that little bit more blend to the character, just fade out this area here completely. Then, oh, that's irrelevant, that was actually a marker which I used for the visor. I then added another flare on top just to give it a little bit more light, and I contributed 2 more layers to it, one gradient map for contrast, and I just tweaked the hue and saturation a little bit, just toning it down so it matched the rest of the background quite nicely. Then it was a simple final gradient at the bottom here just to seal it in, bit of text just to complete the section down here, and then just sort of signed it. And then that's pretty much it. So that's how I made the Halo 4 speed art. I know it's one of them odd videos which can be quite difficult to demonstrate. I hope that you can sort of pick something up from that you have to texture things up to get it to a stage, and they always say it always gets messy before it looks clean, which is what my mum keeps telling me when I try and tidy my room, and it just ends up staying messy. So that is going to be it. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you've enjoyed. The other thing I wanted to ask before I go is, in the hope that I at some stage become a true graphic designer, I thought I'd design myself a bit of a background, and I wondered if you guys were perhaps interested in seeing how to make something similar to this. I know I made a partnership background a little while ago, and you know, I get the feeling that perhaps this might be a little bit better. So let me know in the comment section below, and like the video to show me that you enjoyed the video as well. I want to say thank you all for subscribing. I noticed my subscribers count's gone up to 114, which is spectacular, guys. If we can keep that going, then I might even be releasing a few bits and pieces again to say thanks. So thank you for watching, guys. Have an absolutely tremendous day. Have a fantastic time, and I hopefully will see you in my next video. Thanks, guys. Take care.